Keanu Reeves walked calmly down the bustling precinct hallway, his leather jacket slightly worn, dark jeans fitted, sneakers scuffing softly against the polished floor. His expression was composed, eyes scanning the room with the quiet intensity of someone used to assessing danger in a split second. It was just another day, at least, that's what everyone thought. The officers milling around were busy with paperwork, phones, and casual chatter. Civilians and witnesses peeked through observation windows, unaware that tension was about to explode in an instant. Then it happened. One officer, clearly frustrated and agitated, locked eyes with Keanu. He stepped forward aggressively, chest puffed, voice raised. "Hey! What are you doing here?" he barked. His hand hovered near his holster, a sign of unchecked authority. Keanu stopped, raising his hand slightly, not in surrender, but in calm acknowledgement of the tension. His gaze was steady, unflinching, commanding without words. He didn't shout, he didn't provoke, he simply assessed. There was something about the way he carried himself that made the officer pause, just for a fraction of a second, but in that pause, the hallway seemed to hold its breath. Shouts erupted from other corners of the precinct as the confrontation escalated. Fellow officers froze, unsure whether to intervene. Civilians who had been observing now pressed their faces to the glass, eyes wide in alarm. Every heartbeat felt louder, every second stretched impossibly long. The officer stepped closer, a hand jabbing toward Keanu's chest, attempting to assert dominance and control the situation by sheer intimidation. But Keanu didn't move. He didn't retreat. He didn't even flinch. His presence alone created a strange gravity, a calm that contrasted sharply with the officer's aggression. It was the kind of stillness that makes time pause, where every observer feels the tension, the danger, and the sudden realization that something extraordinary is happening right before their eyes. Then, just as the officer's hand clenched in aggression, Keanu held his gaze steady, his voice calm, low, and deliberate. Every muscle in the room seemed to tense, awaiting the inevitable outcome of this confrontation. No one realized, in that moment, that this wasn't going to be a simple argument. Something was about to shift, something that would freeze the precinct in disbelief, and change the course of the room entirely. Backhand index pointing right. Imagine walking into a situation where authority clashes with justice, and every second could spiral into chaos. How would you act if danger approached unexpectedly, and all eyes were on you? The hallway of the precinct grew tense, thick with the unspoken understanding that something was about to erupt. Keanu Reeves remained still, shoulders squared, eyes locked on the officer who had stepped forward aggressively. The man's face was flushed with frustration, and every muscle in his body radiated a need to assert control. What had started as a glance escalated quickly into confrontation, the kind of situation that could spiral out of control in a heartbeat. "You're in my way," the officer spat, jabbing a finger toward Keanu's chest. The gesture was sharp, deliberate, an attempt to intimidate. But Keanu didn't react with anger or fear. He simply raised his hand slightly, a subtle motion that was both conciliatory and commanding at once. There was no provocation, no taunt, only calm awareness. It was as if the room itself took a breath in response. Fellow officers froze. Some glanced at one another, uncertain whether to intervene or let the tension play out. Civilians behind the observation windows pressed closer, wide-eyed, whispering among themselves. Everyone could feel the raw energy in the air, the precarious balance between authority and aggression, between control and chaos. The officer took another step forward, his frustration boiling over. "Do you have any idea who you're messing with?" he barked. His tone carried the weight of assumed power, the confidence that authority alone was enough to dominate any situation. But Keanu's calm gaze didn't waver. His presence seemed to absorb the aggression, creating a quiet tension that made the officer hesitate, just slightly. The crowd of bystanders, officers and civilians alike, watched, holding their breath as the confrontation escalated. Keanu's body language was deliberate, balanced, steady, controlled. Every movement communicated confidence and restraint. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't lunge. Yet the subtle strength in his stance made it clear that any attack would be met with precision and control. The officer's aggression grew, frustration building as his intimidation tactics failed. His hand hovered near his holster, muscles tight with tension, ready to escalate physically. The moment had stretched into a standoff, the hallway echoing with the sound of shallow breaths, shuffled feet, and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights. Every observer could feel the collision of raw power and unshakable composure. Keanu's eyes scanned the officer calmly, as if reading every intent, every hesitation. He knew that one wrong move could ignite a dangerous confrontation. But he also understood that patience, presence, and mental clarity could neutralize even the most aggressive opponent. His calmness wasn't passive, it was a tool, a force that commanded attention without a single word being shouted. The hallway felt like it had frozen in time. Every officer, every civilian, felt the tension coil around them like a living entity. And in that brief, taut moment, it became clear, this wasn't going to be a simple argument. Something extraordinary was about to happen, and no one could predict how it would end. Backhand index pointing right. How do you stay calm when faced with escalating aggression? How do you assert control without resorting to force, knowing that one wrong move could change everything in an instant? The tension in the precinct hallway reached a breaking point. The officer's frustration had boiled over into aggression, and in a sudden sharp motion, he lunged toward Keanu Reeves. His hand aimed to push, to intimidate, to assert dominance, but Keanu was ready. Not because he anticipated this specific attack, but because his instincts and experience in high-stakes situations told him exactly how to respond. The first contact was brief but jarring. The officer's hand struck Keanu's chest, trying to shove him backward. Keanu, however, did not stumble. His feet stayed firmly planted, his stance low and balanced, absorbing the force without losing composure. Every movement was precise, controlled, deliberate, a silent demonstration that strength alone does not determine control. Other officers froze, watching with wide eyes. Civilians pressed against the observation windows, some whispering in alarm, others clutching their purses or holding on to companions. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, as if everyone could feel the moment teetering on the edge of chaos. One wrong movement could escalate the situation beyond anyone's control. The officer, frustrated by the lack of response he expected, tried to escalate further. He grabbed Keanu's arm, attempting to forcefully push him down the hall. Keanu countered instantly, not with brute force, but with skillful leverage and calm precision. His movements neutralized the aggression just enough to prevent serious harm. The officer's momentum carried him forward, but Keanu's balance redirected it, preventing a full-scale physical struggle. The hallway seemed to hold its breath. Every onlooker felt the weight of the confrontation, the clash between aggression and unshakable composure. Keanu's face remained calm, yet his eyes were sharp, analyzing every micro-movement of the officer. He wasn't fighting out of anger, he was controlling, deflecting, and guiding the encounter toward resolution without unnecessary violence. For a brief moment, the officer realized that brute aggression was futile. Keanu was not only unshaken, he was unyielding in a way that demanded respect without uttering a word. The struggle continued for only a few seconds, yet it felt like an eternity to those watching. Every subtle shift, every step, every glance carried the tension of a potential disaster. Then, just as the officer attempted another shove, Keanu held him firmly at arm's length, using calm authority and precise positioning to freeze the confrontation. His voice, steady and low, cut through the tension. "Stop. Listen." The effect was immediate. The officer's aggression faltered, his hands lowered slightly. Fellow officers relaxed marginally, sensing that the situation had shifted. Civilians exhaled quietly behind the glass. The hallway, once filled with tension and chaos, now trembled on the verge of stillness. In that moment, it became clear that this was not just a physical confrontation. It was a test of presence, of composure, of authority without aggression. Keanu's skillful control had turned a potential disaster into a moment of tense awareness, a subtle, powerful lesson in the difference between fear and respect, force and leadership. Backhand index pointing right. Have you ever faced a moment where controlling the situation with calm precision mattered more than force? How do you neutralize conflict when every second counts? The hallway fell into a taut silence, thick with tension. Keanu Reeves had just neutralized the officer's aggressive lunge with a combination of calm precision and instinctive skill. Every observer, officers and civilians alike, felt the subtle shift. The confrontation could have spiraled into chaos, but it hadn't. And yet, there was something more about to unfold, something that would etch itself into the memories of everyone present. The officer, still chest-heaving from his frustration, glared at Keanu, eyes narrowed and searching for a sign of weakness. He expected a challenge, a threat, or perhaps submission. What he found instead was an unflinching calm, a silent command that radiated authority without aggression. Keanu's gaze was steady, unyielding, and deliberate, a quiet power that seemed to draw the entire hallway's attention into a single, suspended moment. Then, in a voice that was soft but carried an undeniable weight, Keanu spoke, "I'm the new chief." The words hit like a thunderclap. For a split second, time seemed to freeze. Every officer froze mid-step. Civilians pressed against the glass, mouths slightly agape, unsure whether they had heard correctly. The officer who had attacked him paused, mid-gesture, hand frozen inches from Keanu's chest. The tension that had filled the hallway moments before transformed into a stunned silence, punctuated only by shallow breaths and the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Whispers erupted as the words sank in. Did he just say, "The new chief"? Eyes darted between Keanu and each other, disbelief and shock written plainly on every face. The realization was immediate. The man they had confronted, the one who had remained calm under aggression, the one whose presence had commanded attention, was now the highest authority in the precinct. And in that instant, respect replaced fear, tension dissolved into awareness, and the dynamics of the room shifted irrevocably. The officer who had attacked Keanu froze completely. His mind raced, the aggression, the challenge, the attempt to assert dominance, all of it suddenly irrelevant. He was no longer confronting just another civilian or colleague. He was standing before the new chief, a figure whose calm authority and presence had already demonstrated leadership far beyond rank or tenure. Keanu's gaze swept the hallway slowly, making eye contact with each officer, each staff member, and each civilian witness. No one dared interrupt. His presence alone commanded the room, not with force, but with the quiet, undeniable authority of someone who had proven in action that leadership is measured by composure, clarity, and the ability to act decisively when others falter. The shift in atmosphere was palpable. Officers who had moments before been tense and defensive now straightened in posture. Civilians relaxed slightly, understanding the gravity of what they had just witnessed. Even the agitated officer, still frozen in mid-motion, recognized that the confrontation had been a lesson in restraint, authority, and presence. Keanu didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to issue orders immediately. The mere declaration of his position, paired with the calm demonstration of skill and control, had redefined every assumption in the room. Authority had transformed from aggression to recognition. Respect was no longer demanded, it was earned and acknowledged in an instant. In the stunned silence, Keanu finally spoke again, his tone deliberate. Authority isn't about force. It's about responsibility, composure, and how you treat those around you. Actions speak louder than words, and presence commands more than aggression. The officers nodded subtly, absorbing the weight of his words. The hallway, once a battlefield of tension and ego, had become a classroom, a place where the principles of leadership, respect, and calm authority were demonstrated vividly. Backhand index pointing right. Imagine being in a room where power, aggression, and authority collide. How would you react if the person confronting you suddenly revealed a position of ultimate control, not through force, but through composure, skill, and presence? For those who witnessed it, the moment would never be forgotten. The confrontation had been neutralized, tension dissolved, and a new reality established, one in which respect, calm authority, and deliberate action commanded far more influence than any display of aggression ever could. The hallway remained silent, the air heavy with disbelief and awe. Keanu Reeves' declaration, "I'm the new chief," had completely altered the energy in the precinct. What had started as a confrontation filled with aggression, fear, and tension had shifted into something entirely different, a moment of recognition, respect, and recalibrated authority. Every officer, every staff member, and even the civilians observing through glass windows felt the subtle yet undeniable change in dynamics. The officer who had attacked Keanu stood frozen, mid-gesture, his face pale and eyes wide. For a brief moment, he realized the weight of his actions. The push, the aggression, the assumption of dominance, all of it now seemed foolish in the face of Keanu's calm composure and newly revealed position. His training and experience as a law enforcement officer hadn't prepared him for this kind of presence. Authority delivered not through intimidation, but through unwavering confidence, skill, and clarity. Keanu took a measured step forward. His movements were deliberate, composed, and unhurried, each one reinforcing the quiet control he held over the situation. The entire hallway seemed to bend subtly to his presence. Officers straightened, some exhaling slowly as the tension began to dissipate, while others glanced at their colleagues, silently acknowledging that this was no ordinary man walking among them. "Calm," he said, his voice low but carrying weight. "Authority isn't about asserting power through fear. It's about responsibility. About how you conduct yourself under pressure. About how you treat others, even when they challenge you." Every word carried authority without aggression. The officer who had attacked him lowered his hand, shoulders slumping slightly as comprehension and humility replaced anger. The other officers, some initially hesitant to intervene, now looked at Keanu with a new perspective, one that combined awe, curiosity, and the subtle realization that leadership is more than rank or badge. The shift wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Where there had been tension and confrontation, there was now a cautious respect. Where there had been fear and aggression, there was now awareness of the impact of presence, demeanor, and composure. Keanu's calmness had done more than neutralize a threat, it had redefined the boundaries of authority in the room. Civilian witnesses pressed closer to the glass, trying to capture every moment. Some reached for their phones, but hesitation stopped them. This wasn't just newsworthy, it was a lesson unfolding in real time, a demonstration of the subtle power of control, dignity, and quiet authority. The officer who had instigated the attack finally spoke, voice low and uncertain. I didn't realize, sir." His words trailed off as he glanced around at his colleagues, who nodded imperceptibly, reinforcing the unspoken acknowledgement of Keanu's authority. Keanu didn't need to scold or punish. His presence and words had accomplished more than force ever could. Leadership, he demonstrated, is about guidance, patience, and the ability to command respect without intimidation. The lesson resonated through the entire precinct, a subtle but profound reminder of how influence works when paired with clarity, empathy, and composure. Officers who had been tense moments before now approached their tasks with renewed awareness. Civilians exhaled, understanding that the immediate danger had passed, and that they had just witnessed a demonstration of extraordinary restraint and authority. The energy in the hallway shifted from conflict to reflection, from fear to understanding, and from chaos to order. Keanu Reeves' actions, demeanor, and calm declaration had transformed the scene. What could have been a volatile, uncontrolled confrontation had become a teaching moment in leadership, respect, and the quiet power of composure. Authority, he had shown, is not about force, it is about presence, patience, and the ability to influence without aggression. Backhand index pointing right. Imagine a moment where tension, fear, and aggression collide, and one person's calm presence completely changes the outcome. How would your actions shift if composure and clarity could command respect more effectively than force ever could? The precinct had been tested, and in that test, everyone learned a lesson that would endure far beyond the day's events. True leadership doesn't shout. It doesn't need to dominate. It commands quietly, powerfully, and in a way that transforms fear into respect and chaos into order. The precinct hallway, once filled with tension and chaos, now vibrated with a new energy, one of cautious respect, reflection, and heightened awareness. Keanu Reeves had demonstrated something far more powerful than force: control. Every officer, staff member, and observer could feel it, a quiet authority that demanded acknowledgement without a single threat. And yet, Keanu knew this moment was just the beginning. True leadership isn't proven in a single confrontation, it is reinforced through guidance, clarity, and consistent example. Keanu took a slow, deliberate step forward, his leather jacket catching the overhead lights, the worn sneakers making barely a sound on the polished floor. Every movement exuded calm confidence, the kind that doesn't need to intimidate but cannot be ignored. He turned his attention to the officer who had instigated the attack. The man was visibly shaken, shoulders tight, hands lowered, eyes darting nervously. "Listen carefully," Keanu said, voice calm but carrying authority. "Control isn't about proving you're the strongest. It's about ensuring situations don't escalate, about making decisions that protect everyone, civilians, colleagues, and even yourself. It's about clarity in the moment and consistency over time." The officer swallowed hard, nodding slightly. Fellow officers watched closely, some leaning forward, eager to understand the lesson unfolding before them. Keanu continued, "Aggression doesn't create respect. Fear doesn't build loyalty. Authority is recognized through action, presence, and the ability to remain composed when others lose theirs. He gestured to the hallway, to the onlookers, to the tension that had moments ago filled the air. This space, this moment, could have spiraled into chaos. But it didn't. Because calm and controlled action has more impact than any show of force. Remember this every time you interact with someone, whether it's a civilian, a fellow officer, or someone challenging you. Your composure determines the outcome. The lesson resonated immediately. Officers straightened, some taking mental notes, while others reflected on past moments when they had allowed anger or ego to dictate their actions. Even the officer who had attacked Keanu seemed to shrink inward, understanding the magnitude of what he had just witnessed. The confrontation had been neutralized not through aggression, but through clarity, precision, and unwavering presence. Keanu paused, letting the words sink in. The room was quiet, the only sound the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional shuffled footstep. "Control isn't passive," he said softly. "It requires awareness, foresight, and decisiveness. You must act when necessary, but always with thought and intention. That's how authority becomes true influence, not through fear, but through respect." He then turned to address the entire precinct, making eye contact with each officer. "You have a responsibility, to yourself, your team, and the public. Every interaction matters. Every choice matters. Leadership is not a badge, it's the way you move through moments like this, moments that define who you are, not who you think you should be." The effect was profound. Officers who had been tense, hesitant, or even aggressive moments before now nodded in understanding. Civilians exhaled quietly behind the glass, witnessing a masterclass in authority and restraint. The hallway, once a battlefield of ego and tension, had become a classroom of leadership, a space where calm, controlled action replaced fear, and clarity replaced confusion. Keanu's final words in that moment echoed long after he stepped away. Authority is not given. It's earned, moment by moment, action by action. Remember this, and the way you carry yourself will inspire respect far beyond any confrontation. Backhand index pointing right. How would you transform tension into respect? How can composure, clarity, and precise action turn a volatile situation into a moment of leadership that changes behavior and earns trust? The hallway had returned to its normal rhythm, yet something fundamental had shifted. Officers walked with a subtle but noticeable change in posture. They spoke with a new awareness, more measured, more deliberate. Civilians who had witnessed the confrontation exhaled, some still pressing their faces to the observation windows, unable to forget what they had seen. Keanu Reeves' presence and calm authority had left a lasting impression, one that transcended rank, title, or expectation. The officer who had attacked him earlier now stood quietly, reflecting on his actions. For the first time, he understood that aggression and intimidation are not true measures of power. Respect and influence, Keanu had demonstrated, come from control, clarity, and the ability to lead with composure, even in the most tense and unpredictable circumstances. His earlier hostility had been replaced with humility, an internal acknowledgement that leadership is earned through behavior, not enforced through fear. Keanu moved down the hallway slowly, his steps deliberate, his gaze steady, acknowledging each officer with a calm nod. His presence was commanding yet understated, a demonstration of the quiet authority he had cultivated over years of experience. No one challenged him further. No one spoke out of line. The lesson had been absorbed in the most effective way, through observation, action, and the undeniable power of calm decisiveness. Once the tension had dissipated, Keanu addressed the entire precinct. His voice, calm and deliberate, carried the weight of authority without aggression. Leadership is tested in moments like this. Every action you take, every choice you make, can escalate or diffuse a situation. Your responsibility is not only to enforce the law but to uphold respect, empathy, and integrity. True authority comes from how you act under pressure, how you treat those around you, and the clarity of your decisions. Officers listened intently, the words sinking in with the gravity of someone who had demonstrated them in real time. It was no longer just a lesson in authority. It was a blueprint for leadership, a guide on how to navigate confrontation, maintain control, and inspire respect. The civilian witnesses, too, left with a sense of awe. They had seen firsthand that leadership and influence are not defined by aggression, rank, or intimidation, but by the way one carries oneself in the most challenging moments. Keanu's actions had transformed what could have been a moment of fear into a powerful teaching moment. As the precinct returned to routine operations, the impact lingered. Officers approached each other with subtle reminders of composure, the former aggressor seeking guidance rather than asserting dominance. Civilians shared stories of the incident, emphasizing not the confrontation, but the calm, decisive presence that had restored order and respect. Keanu Reeves had entered the hallway as a figure to be confronted, yet he left it as a figure of authority, clarity, and inspiration. The lesson was clear: true power is not enforced, it is demonstrated. Influence is earned through composure, decisiveness, and respect. One person, acting with clarity and control, had transformed an entire environment, leaving a legacy of leadership that would endure far beyond the moment. Backhand index pointing right. How would you act if faced with aggression today? Could calm, measured presence turn fear into respect, chaos into order, and conflict into a lasting lesson for everyone involved? The story of that day would be remembered in the precinct for years to come, not as a tale of confrontation, but as a masterclass in leadership, influence, and the undeniable strength of composure under pressure.